Good morning. It's 10:07 on Friday. It's time for the Real Estate Fix. I'm your host, Rich Szerman. Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it. We're going to talk about some interesting stuff today. I've got a guest on, Marissa. She's a current client in the office. We're going to have her come in, and she's going to talk to you guys about kind of what's going on with her situation. She's got a commercial loan. I've been seeing a lot more of these commercial loans that are being slapped on residential property, and they're a scourge. I mean, they're just a very, very bad idea, and they're very bad for the consumer, and we're going to talk about all that and how to basically to avoid it. You don't get a commercial loan. But we're going to talk about the differences between the two and kind of what they are. And I know it sounds like a bit of a dry topic, but trust me, when we get into this, you're going to understand why I'm making it a big deal and why it's a thing we need to talk about. Because on the Real Estate Fix, we fix real estate problems for people all day, every day, all sorts of problems. And this is one we're seeing more and more and more in the office. But as usual, we like to start off by doing some public service stuff. So I want to make sure one more time to mention, we've mentioned this the last couple months actually, there is a fundraiser, the third annual barbecue fundraiser. It's tomorrow, April 20th from 11 to 2 out on Spunky Canyon in Green Valley, in front of the Green Valley Market, and it's got all kinds of stuff. There's dancing, and there's hot dogs and chili dogs and burgers and all kinds of fun stuff, and there's a jar you can guess the amount of beans. It's a very hometowny kind of thing, and all of the money raised goes to survivors of domestic violence and people with addiction issues. So it's a very good cause. We support it. The good people at AC Dave got us involved with this, and the money goes to a good cause, and it's a lot of fun. Unfortunately, I will not be able to be out there tomorrow. I like to go when I can, but I will not be out there this year because it is my birthday today. I am 53 years old today, and I chose to come in and do a radio show for my birthday. We thought, what would you most like to do? And I thought, I'd like to go on the radio today. So I thought that'd be kind of fun. So I'm not working the rest of the day, but I am doing this because it's important, and because it's fun, and because I like to, make sure you guys are up to speed on stuff. So please, if you have the opportunity, if you find yourself anywhere near Green Valley this weekend or tomorrow rather, go by and stop by. It's right out in front of the Green Valley Market. It's a really nice charity. It's really terrific. And if you are having issues with domestic violence, if you're having issues with substance addiction, BBMS Happy Children Memorial Fund can help you out. So BBMS Happy Children Memorial Fund is who sponsors this. This is their third one, and you should go out there and help them raise some money. It's a good cause. So let's get into some market stuff. First thing I want to talk to you guys about is basically where the real estate market is at. As we talk about this at the top of pretty much every show. And really, it's stagnant. We thought it was starting to defrost a little bit as the interest rate got a little bit better, but we're back in the weeds again. So I'm going to read you a really good post from Sam Chong from the Mortgage Hub. He's a sponsor of the show, friend of the show. We have Mortgage Hub folks on as often as we can. Get a lot of really good data from the Mortgage Hub. Also, if you're not subscribed to Sam's email, you might want to contact him or contact me, and I'll show you how to get in touch with him. It's just go to themortgagehub.com, and you can get apply to for his newsletter, and it's really good. So I'm going to read you from it this morning because I think this really sums up the market pretty well. We're also going to talk about some stuff from the Wall Street Journal and CNN and some of the other stuff so you can see kind of what the public is seeing out there. Okay, so this is from Sam Chong. This is last week, actually. If there was only one thing to know about the mortgage market this month, it would be that the last Wednesday's inflation data prompted one of the biggest single-day increases in mortgage rates in decades. If there was a second thing to know, it's that the first thing is arguably all that matters. Okay, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but it is true that inflation has utterly dominated the outlook for rates. The 30-year fixed rate index jumped nearly 0.3%, putting last Wednesday's in line with one of only a handful of days with a spike of 0.25% or more in the past 20 years. It's a heck of a one-day spike. In 20 years this hasn't happened. This was last Wednesday, on the heels of the jobs report. The inflation report. Why did we see such a big reaction? Simply put, the market keeps waiting for a trend toward lower inflation to resume, and data keeps breaking hearts. This week's report was sort of a third time's the charm moment. January and February CPI, released in February and March respectively, were also surprisingly high. They did damage to rates, to be sure, but markets and even officials from the Federal Reserve are hoping these reports were outliers. The big question is what it takes for progress to resume. The Fed's answer is, quote, just a little bit more time, end quote. You got to love it when a federal agency tells you, just wait a little longer. They're still talking about rate cuts during 2024, but not as early in the year as we'd anticipated. Wall Street is mixed in its expectations, with firms expecting anywhere from 0 to 3 cuts by the end of the year, and it's looking more and more like it's going to be 0. I hope I'm wrong about that. As is always the case, no one can be sure what the future will bring when it comes to economic data and the market reaction. All we can know at present is the progress toward lower rates in 2024 that was widely predicted in late 2023 is unequivocally on hold. A handful of other economic reports can make for fine-tuning adjustments in the meantime, but the bigger picture progress will depend on progress on the inflationary data. There are a few exceptions that could bring rates down even before inflation condones it, but war, recession, and other disasters are arguably worse than waiting. In other words, the only way the rate's coming down is if there's some sort of natural disaster or some sort of man-made disaster that forces it, some sort of disaster that we probably shouldn't pray for, but you know what? I'll take it at this point if it lowers interest rates. Oh my goodness. Basically, what's happened, just to give you a very sort of synopsis of this, an easy overview of this, is the Federal Reserve, in their infinite wisdom, acted foolishly during the pandemic. There are really two massive mistakes that happened, one on top of the other. First, we had a president first of all, before I get into this, the president's only job when it comes to the Federal Reserve, the president's only job when it comes to the Federal Reserve is to pick the members who sit on the board, and that's it. And then stay out of the way. The Federal Reserve must be an independent body. The Federal Reserve must serve the economy, not the winds of political favor. And unfortunately, what happened during the pandemic is the president decided to make the Federal Reserve a political football. They even more foolishly reacted to that. So that's the first big mistake, was making them political and then reacting in a political way. And then the biggest mistake, which I think the first mistake is sort of what fueled, is that they lowered the interest rate way too low for way too long. Had the Federal Reserve started bringing up the interest rate in 2021 or even 2022, we would not be staring at the mess we have now, because here's what happened. The Fed kept the rate artificially low for longer than they should. As a result, inflation began to dig in, which is now what we're currently fighting. And once inflation digs in, boy, trying to stop it without causing a recession is a pretty Herculean task. And that's what the Fed is after. And the Fed has introduced these, what I consider ridiculous targets. They want to see a 2% inflation rate, which is not a sign of a healthy economy. A 3% inflation rate is fine. 2% is way, way, way too low, especially as a target rate. And between you and I, they're not making it. They're not going to see a 2% inflation rate. It's not going to happen. But we could have gotten below 3. We could have gotten to 2.9, somewhere in there. Hell, even 3. And the Fed could let their foot off the gas a little bit, and the interest rate can come back down, and then the housing market can get back going. Because really what's going on, the result of this ridiculous inflationary height, which is unprecedented, it has never happened before, is that you're strangling the housing market. You're strangling any big ticket items that require financing. And the housing market relies on financing. 80% of homes in the United States get bought with financing. That number is about 90% in California. So financing is key to the housing market. And without it, without the ability to get decent financing, because the interest rates are so high, you are strangling the real estate market. So we have this dual situation now where, because the Fed did their job poorly in my estimation, and I understand why, a lot of other reasons as well, but because they were asleep at the switch, because they did their job poorly, because they were so afraid that the pandemic was going to last longer than it did, and they kept it lower than they should for longer than they should. Now we have this problem where we're fighting inflation by raising rates. And what winds up happening is this death spiral where the Fed is creating inflation instead of defeating it. They're creating the very problem they seek to solve because of their own action. I'm a big market guy, and I think most of the time you let the market kind of go where it needs to go. And I think anytime you meddle with it, especially the way the Fed has over the last year, you get bad results. And that's just what we're looking at now. I mean, it can't be all free market stuff. There have to be guardrails, but this is ridiculous. And unfortunately, we were all hoping that the rate would come down a little bit here sooner rather than later. But last Wednesday, there was the inflation report that came out that told us all, nope, it's gone up again. So because inflation has gone up again, the Fed, of course, is not releasing the interest rate. They're not lowering it. Now, they don't directly control the mortgage rates, but they have a very, very big impact on it. So that's how we got here, and that's where we are. And until the Fed decides to do something that's a little bit more useful than they've been doing up to this point, it's not going to change. Because you have people who have interest rates at sub 4. Well, here's a statistic I keep repeating. According to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, 70% of every single mortgage in this country, every one, is at or below 4%. 70%. You get about another 15% if you look at 5. So about 85% of every mortgage in the country is under 5%. Now, if you have a sub 4 or sub 5 mortgage, why in the hell would you refinance now? You'd be at 7%. This week, you'd be at 7, almost 7.25. It would be absolutely insane. And so you have people who aren't refinancing. Those same people aren't selling to buy another house because, I'm one of those people. I'm not getting rid of my below 3% interest rate so that I can go into a 7% interest rate. I mean, my payment would triple. That's completely insane, and that's a lot of people are doing it. So my house is one that should be on the market within the last year or two, and it's not. If you follow trends, traditional trends, and we're holding on. So you have these golden handcuffs keeping people from selling. That's keeping inventory low. That's keeping the prices up, and yet the interest rates are still sky high, and they're not really retarding buying. They're just retarding the entire market. So you have fewer things going. It's basically a shrinkage race between supply and demand. That's what we're looking at. It's all shrinking. We were off about 40. I even say now we're off to about 50, maybe even 60% as far as demand is concerned. Let me read you some of the headlines that we're getting from some of the other sources out there. According to the Wall Street Journal, and this is just yesterday, housing market slumps as mortgage rate tops 7%. There's a fun headline. Existing home sales in March fell 4.3% from February. That's nationwide. Mortgage rates have surged past 7%, and home sales in March posted their biggest monthly drop in more than a year. Renewing pressure on the U.S. housing market as uncertainty over real estate commissions buffet the industry. They're talking about the Sitzer case, which is decided in Missouri, which is going to be another disaster because things aren't difficult enough in real estate right now. The average rate on the standard 30-year fixed-rate mortgage jumped by nearly 0.25% to 7.1%, according to the survey of lenders released Thursday by mortgage finance giant Freddie Mac. That's the highest level since 2023 and the largest weekly increase in nearly a year. It's actually more than that. Existing home sales in March, meanwhile, fell 4.3% from February and was the largest percentage decline on a monthly basis since November of 2022, according to the National Association of Realtors. So, yay, there's that. Those are national numbers. Let's give you another one. This is from CNN, also yesterday. Mortgage rates surged past 7%, reaching highest levels since November. Mortgage rates soared this week, breaching the key 7% threshold and extending America's housing affordability crisis. The 30-year fixed-rate mortgage averaged 7.1% the week ending August 18th, up from 6.88% the previous week, according to Freddie Mac, data released Thursday. A year ago, the average 30-year fixed rate was 6.39. So all the Fed, breaching the 7% threshold represents a psychological threshold that hasn't yet been crossed this year and adds to pressure buffeting the U.S. housing market during this crucial spring home buying season. Mortgage rates have climbed based on expectations that the Federal Reserve won't cut interest rates anytime soon. The Fed doesn't directly set mortgage rates, but its actions do influence them, and persistently hot inflation readings are keeping the Fed on hold. By the way, most of the inflation readings come from OPEC. It was mostly gas and energy prices. It wasn't across the market segment, but here we are. As rates trend higher, potential homebuyers are deciding whether to buy before rates rise even more or hold off in the hopes that they decrease later in the year, said Sam Kiner, Freddie Mac's chief economist, in a statement today. In a separate report, the National Association of Realtors reported that U.S. home sales declined sharply in March, and a sign that homebuyers are waiting on the sidelines as they contend with the tough housing market. They're not just waiting on the sidelines, they don't have enough stuff to buy. There's not enough stuff out there. There just isn't. The amount of houses has been traditionally low for decades, and I guess it's a new tradition if it's been that long, but it's a lot lower than that now. We are going to see by the end of this year, and we thought this year was going to be at least partially a recovery year, with the real recovery happening next year, but in 2024, we are going to see a fall off of average real estate prices going over, using the last decade as an average, of, I'm going to guess, nearly 40 to 50%. There will be 40 to 50% fewer homes sold all over the country, particularly in Southern California. We rely so much on turnover. One person out, one person in. The average person in the United States sells about 15 years. In California, it's every 7 years. For first-time buyers, it's every 3 years. So not having that kind of turnover, which is what really fires the market, missing that is a massive, massive problem. According to Business Insider, this is just, Wednesday, they said many forecasters expected rates to fall this year now that inflation has been coming down, but recent data has been somewhat sticky, so we may need to wait a bit longer for rates to go down. In the last 12 months, the Consumer Price Index rose by 3.5%. This is a significant slowdown compared to when it peaked at 9.1%. So what the inflation is down. That was in 2022, it hit 9.1, but a slight uptick from the previous month's reading. We'll likely need to see more slowing before rates drop substantially. We aren't likely to see home prices drop this year. In fact, they'll probably rise, and that's the headline. So still got high interest rates and still have high prices. So I keep saying this. If you have a house to sell and you don't have another one to buy, this is your market. But that's about 10%, 12% of the market at most. Most people, when they sell a house, have another one to buy. So that's the part of the market that's being served by this, but nobody else. And even they're hurting because interest rates being as high as they are, they have fewer buyers for their property. So the prices might be even higher without it. Fannie Mae researchers expect prices to increase 3.2% in 2024 and 0.3% in 2025, while the Mortgage Bankers Association expects a 4.1% increase in 2024 and a 3.3% increase in 2025. Sky-high mortgage rates have pushed many hopeful buyers out of the market, slowing home buying demand and putting downward pressure on homeward prices. The current supply of homes is also historically low, which will likely push prices up. So there you have it. I mean, you got three different sources there, all telling you the same thing. What's going on is the interest rate is just too darn high. I mean, the average person, we've gone over these numbers many, many times, but the average person right now versus 2 years ago, their mortgage payment is going to be not quite, but almost 3 times the amount the exact same mortgage would have cost them monthly just 2.5 years ago. So, a scant 30 months ago, you could have gotten a 4% or even a 4.5% interest rate. 6 months prior to that, you could have gotten under 4%. So yet now we're in a situation where we're looking at over 7%. And that rate has got to cool. Until that rate gets under 6%, preferably around 5.5, we are not going to reach normality. It doesn't have to get back down to the 3% or the 4% it was at during the pandemic, but it does have to go down. And what the Fed is doing is they are sacrificing whole chunks of the economy in favor of other chunks of the economy. As somebody who is well rooted in one of the chunks of the economy they're sacrificing, I object. I object to the Fed's behavior. This is utter and complete nonsense. My take on this used to be the Fed knows more than I do. I'll just go along for the ride because I have no choice, and I still have no choice. And neither do you guys who are listening. I'm quite sure none of this audience, and they don't ask me. I'm sure they don't ask you. I hope they do. If you are somebody the Fed asks about interest rates, please give me a call because I have a few things I'd like to tell them. I'll be polite, I promise. But that's just not what happens. You have this very sequestered little group of guys, men and women, who come together to make these decisions. And I don't know that anyone really has any real world examples to go from. They're looking at big picture stuff, which is great if you're in the picture. But if you're not in the picture, like, I don't know, the entire residential real estate market, then you're getting squished. Ask anybody who works in real estate. Ask a realtor. Ask a lender. Ask anyone in title. Ask anyone in escrow. Ask anyone in home protection. Ask anyone in home inspection. On and on and on it goes. They're all hurting. We are all in trouble because of what's going on with the Fed. And it's not just us. Here's another fun statistic for you. Consumer credit debt, higher now than it's been in the last 10 years. Consumer savings, lower now than it's been in the last 10 years. People are firing through their savings. They're living on credit cards. And we got a problem because those chickens are going to come home to roost. They are just going to do that. Now, I will also say one other thing before we break for sponsors. I was saying before the pandemic, on the record saying this, we were primed for a real estate downward trend. We were primed to lose about 3 to 5% of real estate's value prior to the pandemic. The market should have cooled. It should have gone down. There was a natural correction. 3 to 5% is not the end of the world, but they are necessary corrections. But because of the pandemic, because of the Fed's unbelievable reactionary attitude to the pandemic, what they've done is they've artificially inflated prices because they kept the rates very, very low. And now they're inflated because of that interest rate drop, we now have fewer properties on the market. And now the interest rate's much higher, so fewer people can buy. So we are in all kinds of trouble. They've turned the market completely upside down, and that's not even counting the commission stuff and the other craziness that's coming up the pike here from the recent legal decision that's going to shake things up with NAR and everybody else. So we'll deal with that next show. But the Fed's actions here, I do not understand them. I've talked to a lot of people who are a lot smarter than me. Some of who are professional economists, one of who even so the shortlist for the Nobel Prize a couple years ago, and still no one can explain it to me. And I'm a pretty bright guy, but I do not understand why they're doing this. I just don't get it. They're trying to retard borrowing, and they're doing a very good job of it. But we're in a country, in a consumer economy that requires borrowing. We live on it. Without it, we got problems, and they cannot stop this train for this long. Unless things start to reverse, unless the rate starts to come down by the end of this year, we are going to see a massive shift in the real estate market, and it ain't going to be good. The shifts are never good. It's going to be bad. How bad? I don't know. My only hope is that the Fed stops goofing around with this, realizes that I'm not the only one saying this. Ask anyone in the real estate market. They will all give you the same opinion. Rates have to come down. And if they don't, we're heading toward, that light at the end of the tunnel is the head of an oncoming train. It's not the end of the tunnel. They've got to drop rates or we're in big, big trouble. Anyway, giving you that little cheery thing, let me also share with you, this is my birthday today. I think we talked about that before. So let's break. Let's go to some of the advertisers. Let's hear what they have to say. Always nice to hear from our advertisers. By the way, when you guys do use our advertisers, when you shop the advertisers, you're also supporting the show. So please do that. We appreciate that. So do the advertisers. So let's go to break. Let's hear from some of them. I'm Rich. This is the Real Estate Fix with Rich on KHTS, FM 98.1, AM 1220, your hometown station. We'll be back in just a few minutes with special guest Marissa. Thanks. Hello, everybody. Thank you for listening to the break. I appreciate it. You're listening to the Real Estate Fix. I'm your host, Rich Szerman, on KHTS, FM 98.1, AM 1220, your hometown station. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys who listened to the beginning of the show through the break. I appreciate it. We have a special guest in studio here, a client who just came into the office a week or so ago named Marissa, and we're going to talk about her story because I think her story I'm seeing more and more of this exact same pattern. And you guys know whenever I see anything that I think is suspicious or I think is underhanded or I think is a scam or I think is wrong, I like to bring it to you whenever I can, as quickly as I can, to try to help save a few other people from suffering the same fate that Marissa's currently working with. So, hi, Marissa. Thank you for coming in. I appreciate it.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, please, my pleasure. It's a heck of a thing when you're in trouble and when somebody's taking advantage of you to come in and talk about that. It's a very brave thing to do, and I appreciate that you've come in to do that for us.
Thank you.
I think you're going to help a lot of other people with this, so thank you very much for doing this. So let me tell you guys, give you a little background. When you go to buy a house, most people get a traditional mortgage loan. 80% of mortgages, as we talked about earlier in the show, 80% of all 80% of all houses bought in the United States, 80% require a mortgage. Very normal. In California, it's 90%. Now, of those, only of all of those mortgages, only 5% of residential homes are purchased with commercial loans, because commercial loans are not meant for a house that you live in. Commercial loans are meant for things that make money. Residential mortgages are for individuals or families in single-family properties, and commercial loans are for properties that generate income. Does your property generate income?
No.
Then why would it be a commercial loan? And I know why. We're going to answer that question. You don't have to answer me now, but it shouldn't be a commercial loan. And this is what happens. So this is the scam. The scam happens when someone who should use a traditional residential mortgage gets pushed into a commercial loan because they are easier to qualify for. They also typically pay the broker higher commissions and are much more expensive to the consumer without many of the protections various laws give to residential mortgages. A commercial loan doesn't have the same protections as a residential mortgage. They are a different breed of cat. You do not get to complain about the Homeowner Bill of Rights with a commercial loan. It doesn't protect you. The Truth in Lending statute, only parts of it cover commercial loans, most of it doesn't. The Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, only parts of it cover commercial, not all of it. When you do a commercial loan, aside from it being more expensive, better deal for the broker who set it up, but much more expensive to the consumer, the interest rates are much higher, and they're more expensive loans to get, they lose a lot of the protections that you would have if you get into trouble. And that is the chief problem I'm seeing with these. They are more expensive, and you give up a lot of the protections you would otherwise have. A lot of the workout problems, workout issues you have, options you have with a loan that's gone bad if you're in foreclosure, you don't have when you have a commercial loan. I will also tell you that a very, very high percentage, it's very difficult to get these numbers, we're still trying to tabulate them, honestly, trying to get them, of mortgage loans that are commercial where the person occupies the house. An unbelievably high percentage of those go to foreclosure, because in my view, they're what we call loan to own. They're vulture capitalists. When they give you these kind of loans and they know you're going to live there, they are loan to own. They have every intention of foreclosing. And we go over the numbers in Marissa's case, you'll see what I'm talking about. I want to give you, there's a great website I found out there called semiretiredmd.com, which is all about investing. It's about a group of doctors, and as doctors, you should invest in property is the idea. But they had some good information on that site, so I recommend it. It's a new one I've just found. According to retiredmd.com, commercial loans are more expensive. They usually come with higher interest rates and shorter loan terms. They're typically amortized over 10 to 20 years or 5 years instead of 30 years, which raises your monthly mortgage payments significantly. You might consider using a commercial loan if you want to buy a property in the name of an LLC instead of your name. But if you don't have an LLC, you're not doing it for business purposes, there is no reason for this. You don't have an LLC, do you, Marissa?
No.
Okay, well, then probably not useful to you. Another reason someone may choose a commercial loan is if he or she doesn't have the W-2 income, and here's where we get to the crux of this, W-2 income or history to be able to qualify for a residential loan. Usually banks want to see a couple of years of history with W-2 income before they want to lend you money. Commercial loans are based solely on the performance of the property, not so much your finances. It may be easier in some cases to qualify for a commercial loan. In other words, if you have equity, like you did, and it is much, much easier for a broker to get you into a commercial loan than it is to keep you in a residential loan. And so from the broker's point of view, it's easier to do the loan and they make more money. The only downside of the broker is it damages the client. So if you aren't the sort of broker loan broker that is, who has a conscience, then these are terrific loans to peddle. If you are a loan broker who has a conscience, these are a horrible idea. If you have a client buying a commercial property, get a commercial loan. If you want to buy a residential property and use it as a rental, go get a commercial loan if that's what you want to do. But if you are someone living in the property and this is your primary residence, you have absolutely no business getting a commercial loan. I'm going to say that again because that is the purpose here. I want everyone to hear what I say. If you are living in the property, you have absolutely no reason to get a commercial loan. If you cannot qualify for a residential loan, if you cannot qualify for a regular residential second, if that's what you need, if you can't work out some other financing, sell the property. Do not go get a commercial loan. Now we're going to talk a little about Marissa's story, and you're going to see what I'm talking about. Marissa, if you would tell the people, I know you live in Valencia. They don't need to know where. Valencia is good enough.
Yes.
And you have a property in Valencia. And when did you buy that property originally? Do you remember?
Oh my God, I bought it about probably close to 18 years ago.
Okay, so you've
Yes.
been there almost 20 years. It's 17 years according to title. You've been there almost 20 years. And do you remember what your loan amount was before you started monkeying about with this? I'll tell you. You owed approximately $332,000 as of 2 years ago. Now, 2 years ago, let's just start here. What happened 2 years ago? So think about this. So you owed about $332,000 on a property that's worth a little over $500,000. So you're in good shape equity-wise. Would have qualified for a reverse mortgage at the time if anybody bothered to tell you that. But what happened? So you're in the property. We're at the end. We're kind of at the tail end of the pandemic. Bottom fourth of the pandemic, I guess. And you got no money coming in, and yet you still have bills going out. Right? Like a lot of people. You weren't alone in that. A lot of people, I think you find most of your neighbors were in the same situation. So what happened in your case?
Well, in my case, I needed some cash money.
To survive.
So then I thought, okay, I'm going to try to get a refinance and get some money from my equity. It was my
Logical.
property, so I can
Sure.
borrow some money.
Sure, you built up a good amount of equity in the time you've been there. You bet.
I really didn't know how much to go around it, so I Googled about some people that could help me to refinance, and I decided that this Equinix, it was the company. Equinix, yeah. So I spoke with a guy that he was really nice and very friendly.
Yeah, we wanted something from you.
Yes. So I told him about that I needed some cash money, and then so after all the paperwork and everything, he says, well, it's going to cost a little more, the mortgage. And I said, well, yeah. I said, but how much? He says, a couple $100. And I thought, okay, well, I can deal with that.
Well, sure, your mortgage goes up a couple $100 more.
And every time he called me, he says, oh, yeah, it was a little more. I was into this without realizing it. I mean, all the papers. And then before I know, it was like $5,000 to $5,000 a month, when the original mortgage was about $2,000. It was more than double.
Almost triple, actually.
Yes, and
Let me just
I
lay
don't
down.
know. I was kind of stupid, actually.
No, you weren't stupid at all. You were taking advantage of it. Before we go on, I want to tell you guys, Marissa is, I will not ask you your age. That would not be fair. But she is certainly eligible to collect Social Security. So what you have is a situation. Look at this let's put yourself in the headset for just a minute of a less than scrupulous lender who markets these kind of things. So what you have is a situation with Marissa where she is able to collect Social Security. I don't want to say elderly. I don't want to get in trouble. But you're certainly in a position where you're collecting Social Security. You have a property with lots of equity in it that you've been in for a very long time. You also had a mortgage interest rate at the time of 3.625. That was your previous interest rate. So these guys come along, you contact them, you say, hey, I need to get some money out of my house because I need money to survive because we're still, the economy's going through all this. We're all in trouble at the moment. And they come up and they tell you it's going to cost a little bit more per month. Your payment at the time was $1,708.86. Now you have HOA on top of that, but that's fine. Meanwhile, you're still, with taxes, interest, everything else, you're still less than about $2,500 a month into the house, which was affordable at the time, just difficult, but at least affordable. And it's going to be slightly more expensive. It'll be $100 here, $100. Well, that's what's called the puppy dog close. It's not this, it's that. Oh, now it's not that, it's the other thing. Now it's not that, it's the other one. So they slowly moved you along each time. Slowly, as your economic situation got worse, your need for the money became more acute, and yet the amount to get it kept going up, the amount of the payment. So now what you have, remember your previous interest rate was 3.625. The current loan that you have is 10.615. That's a jump. Your payment has gone from $1,708.86 a month to $4,576.95 a month. That's an increase of $2,868.09 every month. That's a whole other mortgage payment.
Well, he didn't tell me about all this commercial business because I didn't know there was such a thing. I know I needed to borrow some money, and he didn't explain it to me. I know, you're supposed to read all the papers. There's like 200 papers to sign, and I thought I did. But this is one of the main things that the guy should have mentioned it.
Oh, yeah.
And the interest was going to be so high.
Yep. Oh, it gets worse. Aside from what you're talking about is what a good loan broker should do. Like I talk to the Mortgage Hub all the time. There are other lenders we use around all the time. And a lender any broker should be sitting down with the client with numbers on a piece of paper that says, this is what your old payment was. This is what your new payment will be. In other words, there should be full disclosure. Now, I understand why there wasn't, because I'm quite sure if they said, Marissa, here's the thing. Your previous interest rate was 3.6. Was
It
3.
was over the phone all the
Oh,
time.
it was over the phone. Well, I can understand why they wouldn't tell you, because your previous interest rate is 3.6, your new interest rate is 10.1, and by the way, your payment's going up by 2,800. It's more than doubling, almost tripling.
Mm-hmm.
I'm quite sure they didn't want to just tell you that, because if they had, you would have said, "Wait a minute." So they don't tell you that. They just kind of let you make your way down there. This makes
No.
you focus on. It gets worse. There's another thing I want to talk about with this loan. We'll talk about how we're going to fix it. So you originally you owed $332,000 on this property. That's what you owed 2 years ago when you took out this loan. Your current loan is for $469,000. So you owe them. You now owe. You've upped the debt load on your property by $137,000. How much cash did you actually get out of this transaction?
About 120,000.
So they charged you $17,000 for the privilege of almost tripling your monthly payment. Goodness knows how much the broker made on this, because 10.615 is even high for a commercial rate. So you made the broker a lot of money. You put yourself even deeper into the hole. Your payment's much, much higher, and you gave away $137,000 of your equity. And before we go on, viewers know this, or listeners, please know this. In order to do a reverse mortgage, which is really what should have happened at the time for you, that would have been a much better scenario for you. Instead of that, you get pushed into this loan, and now because you owe so much more on the property, you can't qualify for a reverse mortgage, because there's a debt-to-income ratio, not debt-to-income, excuse me, there's a equity ratio that you have to meet in order to get a reverse mortgage. So now you can't qualify for the financial product you otherwise would and should.
Yeah, well, when I complained about it, he said I was very high. He says, in another year, he says that the interest will go down, everything will be lower. And I said, okay, I was into this already.
Well, you also needed the money. I mean, you could say
trusted
no.
him. Yes,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
I trusted him, and after a year, a little over a year, I called him.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Archie, what's happening? Can you find out? I mean, this is I cannot
Payment's
keep
killing
going
you.
paying this.
Yeah.
And he says, oh, let me see. So he called back and forth, and then you could hear him making numbers, because he was over the phone all the time, all these transactions with him.
So that's very normal.
So and then he says, no, he says, I'm sorry, I cannot do anything. He says, you just have to probably do a loan modification or sell the house. I said, what do you mean? He says, oh, bankruptcy. I said, well, I mean, it's like my I wanted to faint right there.
Oof.
I never went through such a thing, and someone telling me
Shouldn't
that.
go through it, no.
So so I even had my my daughter and her husband talk to him, because I thought, I don't know, maybe they can
Maybe
talk.
you're missing something.
They can
Sure.
speak better than me.
Oh, you speak fine.
So anyway, nothing. So nothing. So I was like, I didn't know what to do. I mean, I am by myself, and I got divorced years ago, happily divorced. But
I have a friend of mine who says, you know why divorces are so expensive? Because they're worth it.
yes. Well, anyway.
Having said that, I'm married to an attorney, so if I were to get divorced, you'll just find me curled up in a corner someplace. We actually have a deal that if my wife feels the need, I'm very happily married, but we have a long-standing
Good.
deal that if she feels the need to divorce me, I'd rather she just kill me. And her best friend has also offered to hide the body, so I think they're in good shape, so that'll work out nicely. So if I just disappear one day, and it's fine with me if that happens, totally fine.
So what I
Go
mean,
ahead.
I didn't have anybody to give me advice. I didn't have, and I thought, I don't know what to do. If I get an attorney, a lawyer is going to, cost me money, so I don't know what to do. And then I thought, well, because I called him 2 or 3 times, and he kept saying he
course.
couldn't do. And then I know I was probably a pain, but I just wanted some help, someone to tell me
Well,
what
when
to do,
somebody
the
in-
first step. And he ignored me. He didn't call me.
Of course not.
So then I said, okay. So I thought, okay, I need a loan modification. And someone gave me the advice. I know you say it was the wrong advice. When you want to do a loan modification, you stop paying mortgage for 2 months.
Yeah, let me stop you there for a second. That goes back to 2008. There was a horrible thing. That rumor, and that's all it is, started because of the original government loan modification program that was called HOPE. They had a requirement that you be 2 months behind, and with the first revision, it lasted less than 30 days. The first revision in that program was to get rid of that stupid requirement, because it makes no sense. Why would you voluntarily damage your credit so you could then get sorted out? It's just dumb. The first rule when you're in a hole is stop digging. You don't dig the hole deeper so you can get help. It doesn't work that way. You don't dig out of a hole by going deeper. So that's very, very bad advice. But I want to go back to this, you can refinance. We hear this from lenders all the time. I get this complaint constantly. I took the bad loan because my lender told me a year from now I can always refinance. Well, what you're presuming there, what you're gambling with there, is that the interest rate is going to be lower. Now,
Right.
had you done a reverse mortgage at the time, I did check this for you, you'd have been about 6%, which is not as good as the 3.6 you're at, but a whole lot better than the 10.6 you're at now. Also, reverse mortgage pays you. You're not digging out money, you're not paying them. So that would have been a much better solution. Any decent lender should have known that. So let's talk about the options he supposedly gave you. The first one was you should refinance in a year. Well, we just talked about why that's not going to happen because you're betting the interest rate's going to go low. And in your case, it have to go a lot lower. And that was, I think, a ridiculous suggestion to make to you to begin with. I think the lender knew damn well that wasn't going to happen the way it was going to happen. He just wanted to complete a loan, make his commission, and go about his day.
Right.
Your well-being, I very sure did not enter into it. So that's ridiculous. A loan modification. When you have a commercial loan, you cannot get a modification. You simply can't. You don't have that
Oh my
option.
God.
And that is a problem with these commercial
So
loans.
they did it purposely.
Absolutely, they did. As we talked about when I first met you, the minute you took out this loan, you were in danger of foreclosure. You had no idea that's what was going on.
No.
But there was no way you were going to survive a $4,500 a month payment or $4,600 a month payment because, forgive me for saying so, your economy does not allow for a payment like that. Your family's economy does not allow for a payment like that.
At the beginning, it was 4,800, almost
Oh,
5,000.
And that's, by the way, that's not even counting the HOA. So I don't think most of us could. That is ridiculous. And yet here's where we find ourselves. So I tell you what, engineers telling me we need to go, producers telling me we need to go to breaks. Let's hear from some of the sponsors. I want to keep you through the break because I want to talk about this some more. I want to get more to the heart of this. So let's hear from some more of our sponsors. We get back, we're going to talk more with Marissa about what her commercial loan looks like, and I'll give you guys some tips for avoiding this thing in the future. The biggest tip is don't get a commercial loan for a house you're going to live in. If somebody offers you one, just say no. You don't even need to think about it. But let's go to break. Let's hear from some of the advertisers. When we come back, we're going to talk more with Marissa about her commercial loan and how you guys can avoid this kind of nonsense in the future. I'm Rich Szerman. You're listening to The Real Estate Fix on KHTS, FM 98.1, AM 1220, your hometown station. Hi, guys. Thanks for tuning in. You've reached The Real Estate Fix. I'm your host, Rich Szerman, on KHTS, 98.1 FM, AM 1220, your hometown station. And we're sitting here with a client of mine named Marissa, who's gotten herself, unfortunately, into a commercial loan. Marissa is eligible for Social Security. She made me promise I wouldn't mention her age. It's also not polite. Anyway, she's very eligible for Social Security. She is a senior. She is in our community. She lives in Valencia. Her life was going along just fine until the pandemic. And that just ruined her economy, as it did for a lot of other people. And unfortunately, Marissa got wrapped up into a commercial loan instead of a residential loan. And because of a less than scrupulous lender and a less than scrupulous company gave her this loan, which, among other things, by the way, says you're not allowed to live in the property. I don't know if you know that. In your loan, it says you're not supposed to live in the property.
Really?
Yeah, well, that's nice. And here's the rub with a loan like this, because I'm sure a lot of you out there are listening to this, and I hope you listen before the break as well, and you're thinking, well, how could you get into a position? How do they give her a loan if she's not supposed to have? And it's because it was profitable for them to do so. But the biggest reason is because, and this is what you get stuck with. I know we talked about this a little bit yesterday, and this is the rub for the client, is if you say, look, I told you guys I live in the property. I told you I don't want this kind of loan. They will say, but you, on the application that you signed, you didn't fill it out, but you signed it, says you're not living in the property and it's a cash flow property. So you lied to them. That's going to be their defense. You committed fraud on your loan application.
That reminds me of something.
Please.
He asked me at the beginning if I live in there because at that time I was not living. My daughter and her husband had been living in there.
Yeah, it's fine.
And I moved from the valley and I rented an apartment.
Yes.
And I was living in an apartment at that time, which I gave up because I couldn't
But this
afford.
has never been a cash flow property.
And he asked me, he said that it would be better if I lived in there. Now that I remember that.
Yeah. Well, the fact that your lender
Oh my
lied to you
God.
about something as minor as that, when they were lying to you about things that were much more major, like the interest rate, like the purchase price, like the payment, I think is more of the same. When someone is demonstrated as a liar, don't be surprised if they lie to you more than once. It's going to happen over and over and over again. And as it did in this case, it's completely ridiculous. So I've actually, as we were talking about on the break, I've read through your loan documents. They're from a company called Velocity Commercial Loans. I've read through them back and forth. Your loan is currently being serviced by PHH. And as you know,
They're horrible people.
they are. We do a segment on the show every so often called Bad Bank of the Week or Bad Bank of the Month. And the year last year we did Bad Bank of the Year. And PHH has been on that list so many times. They just have a permanent spot. PHH is one of the worst lenders in the country. And they're not really a lender. PHH is what we call a non-bank or a servicer. I like to call them non-banks because it makes them angry. They're a non-bank. They are not a bank. They do not lend money. They service money for other people. They are step and fetch it for other people. That's who they are. They work for other people and they act as if the money is their own, and it's ridiculous. And by the way, when you have a loan with PHH or any of these servicers, SLS, SPS, whatever, that goes south as yours has, and they have to do extra work on it, they charge their investor. They charge, in this case, Velocity. So PHH actually makes more money when you have a problem. They're not there to solve your problem. They're there to exploit your problem.
They're greedy. They're greedy people.
Extraordinarily. Yeah, absolutely they are. They also
They're
have a horrible
horrible.
business
I
model.
don't know how that I ended up with them.
Well, I famously on the air in one of my first shows when I was kind of getting my feet underneath me doing this, did suggest that if you worked for PHH, perhaps rather than admitting you worked for PHH in a social situation, there was another career that I suggested that people use. And I've already apologized to the FCC about this because you're not allowed to say this sort of thing on the air. But I did suggest that maybe if they told people they were prostitutes, that would actually be better. Drug addicted prostitutes, that would actually be better than saying you work more socially acceptable than saying you work for PHH. And I stand by that comment because I also think it was funny. Plus, I enjoy insulting PHH at every turn because they insult me and they insult my clients by behaving the way they do. When you have a commercial loan, filing a bankruptcy is also not something that's going to work for you because you have equity in your property. What that means is you'll be paying this ridiculous interest rate and you'll pay it back over 5 years. Now, you need to talk to a bankruptcy attorney, of course. I'm not that. We have a bankruptcy attorney you can talk to. We work with Lou Esmond all the time in our office, friend of the show as well, and does great work for a lot of our clients. A lot of very, very happy people as a result of Lou's work. My wife is also a real estate attorney. I noticed she walked into the station here a few minutes ago. I suspect because she's carrying a big birthday balloon, so I suspect that's for me. She's also with my daughter, who's supposed to be in school today, so I'm a little concerned how that worked out, but she's also 18, so she can sign herself out of school as of about a week ago, so I think maybe that's why. We'll work that out later. But anyway, so let's talk about where you're at now. So you're in a position where you're already starting to fall behind on the mortgage. Luckily, you're not too far behind.
And I thought I had to do it on my own about the loan modification. I couldn't find anything. I looked all over, even called a couple of attorneys if they were real estate attorneys, and both of them, they said, send me the papers. And I look at it and I thought, oh, maybe there's a hope. Maybe they can at least advise. I need advice what to do, what not to do with these people because the days were going by so fast. And
deeper and deeper into
I had
foreclosure,
already skipped 1 month.
Yeah.
It was going to be towards the second month I was not going to pay, and I didn't know if I was doing it right. And I was really very nervous. It was really I just
It's incredibly stressful.
And I
It's where you
blame
live.
myself so much. And
Keep in mind that's part of the scam. Part of the scam here is to get you to blame yourself so you don't complain. This is not your fault. You and I have talked about this. This is no more your fault than if you were walking down the street late at night and somebody jumped out of the bushes and mugged you. It's not your fault you got mugged. You should be allowed to walk down the street at night without worrying about it. You should be able to go to a mortgage broker and get an honest appraisal of your situation. You should be able to get an honest loan. That's not what this is. This is a commercial loan that, in my view, is destined to fail from the minute you got it. In my view, you never should have been given this loan. This loan never should have been available to you. And more importantly, it never should have been suggested to you. Your solution 2 years ago from a reputable lender would have been to get a reverse mortgage. Then your house would be paying you and be sorted out. But instead, you got with a less than scrupulous lender, and you're welcome to give his name if you would like, who put you into this piece of garbage loan. And now as a result of this bad loan, and frankly, I'm shocked that you've managed to keep your head above water for the last 2 years. I'm assuming that's where all the money you got out of this went to.
Yes, I was ready to do it on my own, the loan modification. But like I said, I didn't know how to do it. I want to make sure I do it right. And then it's
Not that it matters. It's a commercial loan. They're not going to allow
these
modification
lawyers
anyway.
were not interested, the lawyers. And then I was just...
Because they knew they
I
couldn't
was
help.
really desperate one day. And then I thought, I have to look. So I kept Googling maybe someone real estate. And
That's how
I
you found
found
me?
you. I found you. I went, oh my God, I thank God. Because I thought they can help me. So it's when I called you.
My
and
wife
left
and
you a
daughter here, they'll be
message.
happy to tell you we're off the air that I'm certainly not heaven sent. But thank you. I appreciate the shout out. Now, this loan never should have happened, and you're not alone. We're seeing more and more of these. We have about a half a dozen of these in the office now, where they're all people of a certain age. They're all people who have equity. They're all people who are taken advantage of. That's just what happened. And in your case, you got about $130,000, $37,000 in equity you spent. About $130,000 that you got back, you had to give away. So thank you guys for listening. If you do have a commercial loan or anything like that, please give me a call. I'll be happy to help you out. I'm Rich Szerman. You can reach me at 661-714-1400. Again, that's 661-714-1400. You've been listening to The Real Estate Fix with Rich. Thank you, Marissa, for coming in. We're going to get your problem sorted out. We'll get it fixed for you, I promise. On KHTS, FM 98.1, AM 1220. I'm Rich Szerman. This is The Real Estate Fix. Happy birthday to me, and thank you guys for listening. Have a good week. Be good humans.